More than a year ago, Rishi Sunak signed a pact with the French government designed to stop illegal crossings over the Channel. Costing nearly £500 million, the UK agreed to fund French police to patrol the Channel and, as Rishi Sunak puts it, stop the boats. But now ITV News has witnessed firsthand French police standing by as migrants load onto a boat in Normandy, only to be rescued later by the UK Border Force. It raises fresh doubt over one of the key pledges that Rishi Sunak has staked his premiership on, as well as the French government's commitment to keeping its word. Here's Peter Smith with this exclusive report.
Another dawn in northern France. Another small boat has tried to cross the Channel. This one has been stopped, not because French police blocked it, but because the dinghy sunk. It is a new tactic for smugglers here in Dunkirk to launch from canals rather than beaches to evade police. But the canals are dangerous. These people had to jump out to save their lives, and then they became stuck neck deep in the mud. A child died here in this very canal just last month. But even death doesn't deter other families trying. A woman pulled to safety suddenly collapses. Her children are watching while police treat their mum for shock. The grim desperation of this situation is here, in front of us. Those who are rescued are not under arrest, nor do they face deportation. In fact, this was filmed for us by one of the migrants on their long, humiliating walk back to their camp. We go into a camp for Vietnamese migrants. These men tell me they will, in all likelihood, keep trying to cross until they either reach the UK or die. I ask if they know how to swim. They say they don't, and so they're scared to be on the boats. With only sandals on their feet, they share soap and dirty toothbrushes. There's a makeshift toilet for about 50 people here, living in tents, hiding from rain and police in the forest. They've travelled across continents to get here. What life did they leave behind them for this? Here we meet Dat, using a fire to stay warm and cook. He's here because he owes a debt to the mafia in Vietnam. He tells me they're charging 4% interest per week and they've taken control of his house. Eventually they gave me an ultimatum, he says. Either I can go to the UK to work for them and repay the debt, or they'll sell my wife's organs. We have to stop at this point. Organised crime gangs from Afghanistan and Iranian Kurds control these camps. They are here now, and we've just been spotted. The UK government is now specifically targeting Vietnam with a social media campaign. They're warning about the gangs, the horrendous conditions and the dangers of the small boats. But if the intention was to deter people, the evidence we've found here is it's not working. I don't expect people in your country to welcome me with open arms, this man says. I know I'm going illegally, but I'll still go. I have to work there and send money to my family. Those smuggling gangs have their own social media campaign now. We found out they are asking some of those going on the boats to become influencers, posting their journeys on TikTok, apparently showing how easy it is, and with details on how to join them. We have information about a specific encrypted messaging app the Vietnamese smugglers are now using here. On that app, we've just found one of the smugglers openly advertising that he's recently taken 49 people across the Channel on one of his boats. So we set up a fake profile pretending to be Vietnamese, trying to get to the UK. Then one of our team called him.
Alo.
Anh ơi, thì
Em đi cano đúng không?
dạ, em không biết là anh lấy bao nhiêu.
Thì hiện tại thì bên anh đang lấy giá ba đồng em ạ.
Rồi rước một cái cano thì có bao nhiêu người anh nhờ?
Một cano thì có rơi tầm khoảng 50 người đến 60 người em ạ.
Helpfully, he then gives us the details for when his next boat is leaving. So we go to that location and wait. Our team spent 6 hours hiding in the sand dunes near Dunkirk, and this is what we saw. French police are out from before sunrise, searching. A radio call comes in to say a boat with about 42 people has already started crossing the Channel. They believe there are others here, and they're on the hunt. A group of around 40 is found, huddling together in the dark. Police round them up, but no one is questioned. We watch as they are simply escorted back to their camps from where they came this morning. These vehicles on the beaches and the drones overhead are in fact paid for by Britain. Part of a £500 million package over 3 years agreed by Rishi Sunak to stop the migrants while they are in France. Police have so much presence here now, it's hard to imagine how anyone could sneak past them here today. But then we found this group of more than 50. They didn't have to sneak. They were walking quite brazenly through the streets and heading for the beach.
There's a lot of police today. Are you worried about being caught?
For the first time since sunrise, though, the police were remarkably nowhere to be seen. This group were being guided by an Afghan man. They saw the beach was clear, and at this point he can be heard giving them the order.
Go, 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 go.
It is low tide here, and a long, long way to go to get to the sea. And yet, still no sign of the French police who have been here all morning. But as they approach the shore, there is also no boat for them yet. Their frustration gives way to anger. The Vietnamese here tell me they're still hopeful of going to England today. And at that, another boat appears from the canal, but it's already full. Now though, French police are on their way. The buggies are here. It looks like the migrants have missed their chance. But the police don't appear to be interfering at all. They simply stand back and watch. The boat on the channel even has the audacity to turn back towards the beach where the police are waiting. They're coming back to pick up the others. It is hard to imagine how any more could fit on board, but unbelievably, they do.
This small boat that we're seeing here is now crammed way beyond capacity. More than half that we can see don't have life jackets, and that includes the elderly and the incredibly young.
This dinghy is now a potential death trap, but slowly and uninterrupted it trundles towards the UK. The French officer on the beach here can be heard saying 100 are on board, but just one man decided not to get on. He has just been seen helping others climb on and then push the dinghy out to sea. But police do not take him in for questioning. He's handed back his phone, and like everyone else, he is let go to try again. The small boat we saw leaving was so dangerous, UK Border Force dispatched a vessel to pick the people up. Here we see them being taken into Dover. The official count is 82 arrived here. Any claims for asylum in the UK are now being considered. Back in France, those who didn't make it this time are joined by new arrivals, just waiting in the camps for their next chance to cross. This is supposed to be the UK government's defining mission, to stop the boats. But from what we have witnessed here, they are still coming, undeterred, unfazed, and sometimes even unimpeded. Peter Smith, ITV News, Dunkirk.
Out today, all 7 British terrorist co-conspirators of an Al-Qaeda dirty bomb mastermind, a guy called Darren Barrow, are freed after serving just half their jail terms. The thugs were caged for a total of 136 years in 2007 over a terror plot to kill hundreds of people in London and New York. You remember around the year we have, of course, had 9/11, and then for a number of years afterwards, and still the terror threat is a very big one, but there were a number of years when there were a number of plots that were foiled. And these British men who were part of a sleeper cell that planned a series of bomb plots in the UK and US are back on the streets despite being jailed in 2007 for a combined 136 years. Peter Blexley is in the studio with me. He's a former Metropolitan Police detective. Hello, Peter.
Good morning.
Chris Phillips is former head of the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office. Chris, I'll come to you in a second. Peter, how could this be allowed to happen? I think there'll be a lot of people scratching their heads thinking, surely these people should die in prison.
It is absolutely staggering that these people who were supporting Darren Barrow in his very advanced plans to blow up places in New York like the International Monetary Fund headquarters and to blow up pedestrian foot tunnels in London so that they could bring death to hundreds or thousands of people, and they had advanced plans. Some had gone to Pakistan, for terrorist training. Some were trained in counter surveillance so that they could identify if they were being followed or not. One had a garage and was sourcing gas canisters and tyres to be used in a bomb. Another was an engineer and had structural expertise, so knew where to place bombs to bring down buildings. It's absolutely astonishing that now all of Barrow's co-conspirators are out on the streets.
Back on the streets. Chris Phillips, how has this been allowed to happen? Because some of these sentences, of course, a lot of people serve half their sentence in prison and then half unlicensed, but there were reforms a few years ago to make sure that terrorist offenders spend at least 2/3 of their time in prison. Why is this happening? I'm very confused, Chris.
Well, I think everyone's confused, actually, Peter. This group of people were actually sleeper cells, so they were trained to literally hide in society and then pop out again when the time came for them to commit mass murder. And clearly, the only benefit to this is there's less terrorists in prison. But of course, that's made it much more dangerous for the rest of us. Legislation around sentencing is very difficult to understand. The fact that they get given 26 years and then are released less than half of that sentence is just bizarre. And I think these people came before the changes in the legislation, which allowed them to be kept in prison longer.
Chris, what will happen now? I mean, presumably the security services will be keeping a very close eye on these people to see if they reoffend.
Yeah, another 7 people for the security services to monitor and watch, and that's just not feasible. Of course, they will have some. They will be watched by the security services, but the amount that the police and security services can do that is limited, particularly with the sheer weight of numbers of other people that are a similar sort of threat. But listen, the criminal justice system is playing Russian roulette with our lives, actually. These people may well have repented. It's unlikely. They were people that were really up for the cause and wanted to kill people. And now that they're out, they're a real danger to society.
Peter, what do you make of this from a policing perspective? Surely this will put a lot of pressure on the police as well to help the security services monitor these people.
It will put pressure on, yes. So, like Chris alluded to, they'll wear tags, for example. They will have to report to probation officers at particular times and places and the such like. They may even be subjected to a curfew. I'm not sure about that. We'd have to find out. But essentially, I can't discuss this story without alluding to the brilliance of the security services and the police officers that managed to detect and arrest these people, bearing in mind how sophisticated their training was.
Yes.
And they were trained to spot surveillance so that they could avoid it. And of course, that brilliance is carried on to this day. And every morning when we wake up and we do not hear the tale of a terrorist attack is absolute credit to those brilliant men and women who keep us safe while we sleep.
And there is so much we'll never know and can never know about the work that the security services and the police and others do. But it must be very galling, Peter, for the police officers and security service officers and others who put a huge amount of work into this to bang these people up, to say that after only a few years they're back on the streets.
It is, but any career, vocational, experienced detective is pragmatic about these things, because if you got hot under the collar about every early release, about every parole board decision, about every criminal that you'd locked up and then after a few short years was back out on the streets, you would just drive yourself crazy with frustration and irritation. Sometimes you just have to accept that the sentencing, the monitoring of prisoners after you've done your job, which is to gather the evidence and put them in front of the court, is the responsibility of others. And if they are fools, like so many on the parole board are, then that is a matter for them and not us.
Chris, it's interesting, the Home Secretary at the time was John Reid of Labour, who said the outcome of this trial once again shows the extent of the very real and serious threat the UK faces from terrorism. What is that threat at the moment, do you think?
Well, the threat hasn't gone down. That's the key point. The fact that there hasn't been a terrorist attack for some time simply means that we've all become a bit complacent. I don't think there's complacency within the police. What I would say is that this group of people I mean, the amount of work that went into convicting these people was incredible. And most of the detectives, if not all the detectives involved in this, like me, have retired and are no longer in the police. So the chances of them being too upset are unlikely. But listen, these people are dangerous. You know, they are. This is not someone that's been released because they've committed an armed robbery or a street robbery. This is people who really decided that they wanted to kill hundreds and hundreds of people for their cause. That cause has not gone away. Al-Qaeda still exists. ISIS still exists. We know that. They're making a bit of a comeback. The whole remit, the whole rationale for them doing these things still exists. And that makes these people very, very dangerous and back out on our streets.
The danger continues, Peter.
Of course, because it's a religious ideology. And it's very difficult to defeat that. We have the Prevent programme, whereby people can report if they have suspicions about people, but that's an imperfect system. It does get some people brought to the attention of the authorities, and some is better than none. But essentially, when this is a religious-driven, perverse ideology fuelled by hatred, whereby people want to wipe the likes of you, me, your viewers and listeners off the face of the earth, it is deeply, deeply challenging. What I must say is that the leader of this gang, Diram Barrow, who we mentioned before, was originally sentenced to 40 years. That was reduced on appeal to 30, and he will not be released until 2037. But his henchmen, his gophers, his researchers, his minders, they are all now back on the streets of the UK.
Chris, just finally, how would you assess counter-terrorism in this country at the moment? Are they doing the job? Are they catching people who need to be caught? Are they monitoring the right people? I'm sure it's an imperfect system because it can never catch everybody. It can never have the resources that are needed to look into every single thing that every potential terrorist does. And there's a lot of criticism, of course, of the security services if someone who's on their watch list then goes on to carry out, quite justifiably, criticism of if there are people who go on to carry out atrocities. What is your assessment of how intelligence is in this country at the moment, Chris?
Well, clearly it's working very well. I always used to say that it was a bit like being a goalkeeper in a team that's never going to score a goal. You know, they score one goal and they win, and that still remains the situation. We have a number of people, we know that are in the country and around the country that still think that murdering people is the way forward, and murdering lots and lots of people is the way forward. And of course now another 7 have been put into that pot, and that's the difficulty for the police. They're always playing a game where they're really trying to divert events, so stop attacks from happening. But of course, on the odd occasion, one is going to get through, and you know we are overdue that. And we've seen in France and across Europe that you know terrorism is still a big issue, and we just have to thank our security services and police, mind you, for preventing that.
Sue in Macclesfield has been in touch on WhatsApp. She says, good morning, Peter. These terrorists back in the street doesn't surprise me. What has happened to national security? How much money is this costing the taxpayer? What happens if there are more terror attacks? You couldn't make this up. Penny says, this is unbelievable that these terrorists have been released onto the streets to plan what they did before and commit mass murder, which will happen. Well, we don't know they're planning anything, of course, but certainly it is a worry, and it's a perfectly legitimate worry. Penny continues, what a pity Peter Blexley isn't running the Met with a lot more like him. This country has gone, and all in the name of religion. Peter, a final word from you on this.
This comes against the backdrop of Muslim gangs now ruling the roost in British prisons. Many people in jail for a long time are converting to Islam.
And being radicalised there as well. So it's not just people who go in for terrorism offences, it's people who are radicalised in prison.
Absolutely. So there's nothing scandalous or scaremongering about anything that you, me or Chris have said this morning. This is a very real threat. We need to remain on high alert.
Shocking new analysis has revealed that judges have overturned Home Office decisions and allowed asylum seekers to stay in the UK in 51% of cases since 2021. In one case, an immigration judge ruled that a convicted sex offender could remain in the UK because he'd be at risk of mob violence in his home country of Afghanistan. A Bangladeshi man who was locked up for 12 years for murdering his wife successfully appealed the Home Office's decision to remove him by arguing that his conversion to Christianity would put him at risk in Bangladesh. Sound familiar, anyone? The Home Office data also shows that from 2011, more than 50,000 people who were refused asylum have remained in the UK illegally. OK, 50,000 people who we have refused asylum have just remained in the UK illegally. Welcome to the show now, Director of Migration Watch UK. It's Mike Jones. Mike, great to see you. Look, what do you make of this? These numbers are stark. We're not deporting anyone, really, are we?
Figures are shocking. I mean, the most fundamental question in asylum policy or illegal migration policy is if somebody enters your country illegally, or if they apply for asylum and they're refused, can you deport them? That's the most fundamental question. Now, in the vast majority of cases, the answer to that question is no, we can't deport them. There are some exceptions. The reason why the number of Albanians crossing the English Channel illegally has declined is because we have a returns policy with that country. But in most cases, countries are deemed unsafe. We can't deport them to their country of origin.
And I think many people will want to know, how on earth have we managed to have 50,000 people who we have refused asylum to, just wandering the streets of Britain, living here? Will they still be claiming benefits? If they're not claiming benefits, presumably they're living a life of crime and wandering around the streets. It's just incredibly disturbing, Mike, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately it goes back to the legal system that we have. There's the legal aspect and there's the operational aspect. Essentially, for the asylum system to function properly, you need a legal system that allows you to deport people to their country of origin. So we have the Human Rights Act that enshrines the European Convention of Human Rights into British law. We have what's called the principle of non-refoulement. So if somebody is here from an unsafe country, you can't actually deport them to their country of origin. It's very difficult to do this. My personal view is I think this legislation is out of date, it's not fit for purpose. I believe it's de-democratized the asylum system. I don't believe the state can perform its proper duties in terms of enforcing border controls. And yeah, it needs to be changed, but politicians, unfortunately, won't address this.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, someone who's, would be at risk of mob violence in his home country of Afghanistan, a convicted sex offender. I mean, what I want to know is, where are all the Afghan women who we should be letting in? Where are all the Afghan children who are fleeing these people? Why is it that we are getting Afghan sex offenders instead and then having to keep them? It doesn't really seem fair.
Yeah, I mean, I received a phone call recently from a member of the public, and they referred to a story in the Daily Telegraph, and four Afghan illegal immigrants were being tried for sex offences. And, his argument was, well, the lawyers focus on their human rights, but what about the human rights of the victims? And, there's a huge trade-off here. I think the legal system as currently constituted is incompatible with national security and the democratic will of the British people.
Yeah, I mean, there appears to be very little point in even trying to get rid of anybody at the minute. So let's assume, well, we don't have to assume, we know that quite a lot of people are just granted asylum first time around anyway. So let's take them out of it. Then of the people who are rejected, half of those are then granted asylum at the second attempt. If you're in the case of Abdullah Zidi, for example, you may be granted it at the third attempt. And then of those people who we have decided to categorically refuse asylum to, which will be a fraction, really, of all of those people who initially came over here, 50,000 of them are still wandering around the streets, living in Britain. It is an absolute joke. Dr. Mike, thank you very, very much. It's always great to have you on the show. It's Dr. Mike Jones there of Migration Watch UK. Now, a Home Office spokesperson said this: We stand firm on our long-standing policy that those without a right to stay in the UK will be removed. Our Illegal Migration Act makes this possible, as people who enter the UK illegally will have their asylum claims and human rights claims declared inadmissible. Each asylum application is individually assessed, including decisions on removal of individuals. Where people have previously been refused asylum in the UK, a fresh asylum claim can be made through legal representation.